This meeting is being recorded.
Now it has 2 announcements instead of just 1. So welcome everybody. We are excited to be here tonight and talking about IEPs. As everyone who knows me knows that IEPs are true and really dear to my heart, and I could talk about IEPs for hours. My name is Dr. Kelly Olson. I am the Director of Student Services. And then we have Mr. Freiberger. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew Freiberger. I'm the assistant principal at West Oak Middle School. I'm really happy to be here and joining alongside Kelly and her expertise.
And then,
hola, buenas noches. El día de hoy tenemos a Dr. Kelly Olson. Ella es la directora de servicios estudiantiles. Y también con nosotros está Matt Freiberger. Él es el subdirector de la escuela secundaria West Oak. Y mi nombre es Mitzi Monroy, yo soy la secretaria de la escuela West Oak.
All right, so tonight our agenda is going to be talking about what an IEP truly is, what kind of meetings you might go to at an IEP, and then who's on a team, what the process may be, what IEP meetings are, and then some really good key takeaways and key areas of the IEP itself.
En esta noche vamos a hablar de algunos temas que serían definición del IEP, tipos de reuniones del IEP, quién está en el equipo del IEP, proceso del IEP, reuniones del IEP, áreas claves del IEP y conclusiones de la clave.
All right, so starting off with what an IEP is. An IEP is an individualized education plan, and it's a legal document with very specific requirements. It is a plan that the special education team does for the student, and it is withheld throughout the entire school day and calendar year that the IEP is written for. It is legally bound, and you have to provide a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. And we will talk more about what the least restrictive environment is more towards the end. With that, when we look at an IEP, there are specific team members that are required to be there. Number 1 is parents. Parents absolutely have to be a part of our IEP team because you guys know your children the best. And we value everything that you say. You see them in a variety of environments, and we see them more in the school setting. So parents are one of those required team members. Then our general education teachers, our special education teachers, and then if there are specific related service team members like an occupational therapist, a social worker, a speech pathologist, and then we get a little bit into more of a finite and area that we look at when we look at like vision and hearing itinerants and physical therapists. Those are all different people that could be part of your team. And then every meeting you have to have what's called an LEA rep, and that is someone who is able to make decisions for the IEP team that have financial backing and can go ahead and say, yes, we can buy this assistive technology, or yes, we can get this support for you and transportation for the child. So that is all who's required, as well as we like to have an administrator there just to be there to be able to help support and answer any other questions or concerns that might come up during the meeting.
Esta noche usted se preguntará, pues, ¿qué es un IEP, verdad? Es un documento legal con requisitos específicos, un plan para servicios de educación especial dentro del ambiente escolar, legalmente obligado a proporcionar una educación gratuita y apropiada en el ambiente menos restrictivo. Miembros específicos del equipo requeridos serían que los padres, también tendrían que asistir los maestros de educación general, maestros de educación especial de sus hijos, algunas personas de servicios relacionados como las personas que le ayudan a la terapia ocupacional en la persona que se encarga del lenguaje de su hijo, una persona que lo ocuparía para terapia física y también se ocuparía como la enfermera, un consejero, un trabajador social y un psicólogo. Y también obviamente se requeriría un administrador.
So then next we talk about what the IEP process is. And the IEP process can be a few different ways. So please know that if it doesn't go this way, it might go a little bit different. It is just really dependent on the needs of the student and the needs of the case itself. So the very first thing that happens is the school is recognizing or a parent is requesting an evaluation. And that's because there is a noted concern and there's data, especially in the school setting, that is really supporting that concern that we are looking at. And the school itself has tried different interventions to address the school concern that is impacting the child in their educational environment. And when we're saying that, we're saying it's not just that it's impacting them in the educational environment, but it's also negatively impacting them. So they're struggling with some reading, they're struggling with attention, which is then stopping them from being able to attend to the academic task. Or their attention is getting on task, off task, and they're not able to complete anything to show us what they are able to do. And it is actually preventing them to learning that content and that skill. So that's that first part, is the parent or the school initiates and requests an evaluation and consideration for an evaluation. Then what the team does is, as that educational team, like we talked about earlier, we go ahead and we meet, and it's called a domain meeting. And at that domain meeting, we go through all the different domains and talk about current information about the child. So that would be in your communication domain, your cognitive, your academic, your health, your motor, and I'm going to forget one more, but don't worry, it's on the next slide. So we'll go over that one. But each of those domains are what we will go through to talk about what existing information we have. And then what do we think as a team is needed and or warranted to get some more assessments to learn more about the child and what that learning concern is and how it's really impacting them. And that can look like in a cognitive assessment. It could look like an IQ test, like an assessment test. It could look like some achievement assessments. It can look at some fine motor assessments for occupational therapy. It could look like I'm thinking in speech with some pragmatic language, expressive language, receptive language. So each domain has very specific areas, and we would like to see, okay, this is what's going on with the student. This is the information we have. What more do we need to be able to really look at this child and determine, is there something that is impacting them negatively that we need to write a plan for? Then once we have that plan, we ask the parents to sign consent that we're going to move forward with all that testing, or we're going to say, you know what, we have enough information, and right now we don't feel that based off of this information that this is actually impacting the child negatively, and we end the process there. The other way, like I just said, is to go ahead and continue on with the process and have the parent sign consent for those assessments. And then we do that step 3, which is the evaluation meeting, where we come back as a team and go over all those results and discuss, okay, is there an eligibility? If so, one out of 13 or more, which one best meets the child? And you actually can have up to 3, which ones really meet the needs of the child, and talk about how the child is impacted. And then step 4, like I just said, was going over those 13 eligibilities and then saying, okay, now we have an eligibility for the child, or no, they do not qualify for services based on all this evaluation criteria, and there's no IEP. So it's either you're going to have an IEP at the end of this, or you are not, based on all the information that is collected as the team goes through it. And again, every step of the way, we encourage parents to be part of the team and really be that voice, and let us know if you're hearing or seeing something different. Let us know so that we can see it from your perspective and take that in consideration while we're looking at everything.
A continuación le vamos a presentar el proceso de referencia con 4 pasos. El paso uno son los padres o la escuela solicitan una evaluación basada en la preocupación que tiene un impacto negativo en las necesidades académicas, funcionales, sociales del estudiante. Paso 2 sería el equipo educativo lleva a cabo una reunión de dominio para revisar los datos y determinar si se necesitan más datos para una evolución multidisciplinaria para el estudiante. Como sería, cada miembro del equipo revisaría todos los datos actuales de los estudiantes y si se justifica la evaluación que les gustaría realizar para recopilar más información. Si el equipo se acepta proceder una evaluación, los padres firmarían el consentimiento para la evaluación. El paso 3 sería la reunión de la evaluación es realizada por un equipo disciplinario para distinguir las evaluaciones y la elegibilidad. En este caso, si el papá o los maestros detectan una preocupación acerca del estudiante, pues el padre de familia firmaría todo eso diciendo que pues sí está de acuerdo con lo que los maestros ven y el padre ve. El paso 4 sería el equipo discutiría como 13 elegibilidades y revisaría los criterios para determinar la elegibilidad. Si el estudiante es elegible, se lleva a cabo la reunión del IEP.
Wonderful. All right, now we're going to move on to types of meetings. So we talked about the process of referral and what it looks like for your student if they might need an IEP, or as we as an educational team with you involved determine that. These are the types of meetings you might encounter. So there are 4 main types. A domain meeting, which was spoken about. There's an evaluation and a reevaluation. So an evaluation will take place once every year. An IEP annual review will take place once every year. There's an evaluation and a reevaluation. The reevaluation will take place every 3 years. And then for each of these meetings, they'll have the same attendees, including you as the parent as well, or any family members or advocates you'd like to come as well. So there's an educational team that includes the gen ed teacher, so they can give input on how your student is doing in the classroom, special education teacher or case manager, that they interact with your students inside and outside of the classroom for push in or pull out services. There's an LEA representative, which would be somebody like myself, administration as well, which would also be somebody like myself, related services team. So these are those assessments that we might do before the domain. And then these individuals that would be working with your students throughout their IEP. So a speech pathologist, a social worker, a school psychologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, all those individuals who beyond the classroom will help give your students access to the education they deserve and need.
Lo siguiente que vamos a hablar son los tipos de reuniones. Tipos de reuniones serían como una reunión de dominios, una reunión de evaluación y reevaluación, el IEP revisión anual, que sería cada año. También se haría una reunión de asistentes y sería el equipo educativo, en este caso serían los maestros de su hijo, y sería el maestro de educación general, maestro de educación especial, representante del LEA, administración, servicios relacionados basados en el estudiante, patología del habla, trabajador social, psicóloga, terapeuta ocupacional y fisioterapeuta.
Thank you, Ms. Monroy. So the first type of meeting that was mentioned was a domain. The purpose of this meeting is to review existing student data. So anything that teachers have observed or a school psych has observed, or you as a parent has observed, that's really important details for us to go over. We review if there is a need or what the need is based on the data that's collected. We'll review your input together as a team, and then we'll review data for any of these types of assessments. So academic, cognitive, functional, health, vision, hearing, motor, and communication. There are a lot of different types of each of those that go into each of those categories. Academic is self-explanatory. Cognitive is basically where your student is at based on their compared to their same age peers. Functional, the executive functioning, how they're functioning in the classroom as a whole. Health and vision and hearing are pretty self-explanatory as well. And then motor and communication. Communication can get into their perceptive language, their receptive, expressive language, and pragmatic language as well too. Basically, is their communication with teachers and with peers hindering their ability to get the education, again, that they are entitled to and that they deserve.
Vamos a hablar del tipo de reuniones. En una de las que tenemos sería el dominio. Los propósitos serían datos de estudiantes existentes, revisar las necesidades de recopilar datos adicionales. En este caso, si ustedes saben una información del estudiante que nosotros no sepamos, como de cosas que hacen, como dar vueltas, comer algo de lo que no es normal, actúan de una manera de la que nosotros no sabemos, pues también nos dirían toda esa información a los maestros y para que hagan y revisar la entrada de los padres. La reunión de dominio revisa los datos y las evaluaciones potenciales de abajo serían académico, cognitivo, funcional, salud, visión, oído, motor y comunicación. Todos estos son los temas que ellos pues revisan y ahí seguirían como un plan para que ellos decidan de cuál es el que ellos necesitan para darle un poco más de apoyo.
Thank you. The next type of meeting goes after the domain. This is the determination of whether or not your student, if they were referred for an IEP, would be eligible in any one of the categories. I believe, Dr. Olson, you mentioned there are 13 categories. They range in eligibilities, they range in reasons why, and there would be, this is where we would go through as a team as well and determine whether or not they fit the criteria, or so inclusionary or exclusionary criteria. And then that is where your input is really, really important as a parent. So when we're going through as a team, this is where, if we're asking you a question like, does the child's ability to does the child have a continued mood that affects their ability to learn? And that's where, as a parent, we would really need to know the input from the home life as well, so that we would be able to give the services to your student that they need. And then educational needs as well. So basically, the evaluation, I don't want to repeat who's there because it's all the same participants. But in this meeting, we're going over the data from the domain that we asked you if we could test your student on, and then we're determining whether or not they're eligible and what they would be eligible under. As Dr. Olson mentioned as well, there are you can have up to 3 eligibilities. So there'd be a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. But it doesn't have to be 3. It could be just 1 or 2.
El otro tipo de reunión que los maestros harían sería una evaluación. El propósito sería revisar y discutir los hallazgos de cada categoría de dominio, determinar el estudiante si califica o no para los servicios educativos bajo el IEP. La agenda sería revisar los hallazgos en cada categoría, como académico, cognitivo, funcional, salud, visión, oído, motor y comunicación. como les había explicado en el tema, en la otra dominio. Detectar elegibilidad sería criterios de exclusión o inclusión en necesidades educativas.
Awesome. So this next type of meeting is called a reevaluation. This is the one that will take place every 3 years. This is where the team will meet and determine almost like redetermine eligibility. So you would have met with the IEP team in an annual review meeting each one of the 3 years in between the evaluation and the reevaluation. This is also a redetermine whether or not your student needs more minutes in certain areas, less minutes, more time in the gen ed classroom or less time. This is an opportunity for us to kind of reflect and see where the progress is at and whether or not we need to add or decrease services. So go ahead.
You can jump in that too. And that's something that we actually do yearly at the IEP. And this reevaluation is that focus is to really determine if the child needs to continue on with the IEP and what eligibility, or if, you know what, they met all their goals and they closed that gap for them and we're able to dismiss them from services.
Perfect. Much more eloquently put. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So that I'm glad you mentioned that too, that you don't have to wait the 3 years to exit from IEP services if your student is closing that gap. But we're going to review the same findings. There might be in that annual review like an adjustment of goals and things like that, and you discussed this at the 3-year reeval too. But we're going to redetermine eligibility at this meeting. Go ahead, Mitzi or Ms. Monroy.
Lo siguiente tipo de reuniones del IEP sería una reevaluación. El propósito sería revisar y que discutamos los hallazgos de cada categoría del dominio, determinar si el estudiante califica o no para los servicios educativos bajo el IEP. La frecuencia sería de cada junta ocurre cada 3 años esto, y la agenda sería revisar los hallazgos en cada categoría de cada tema, que sería académico, cognitivo, funcional, de la salud, visión y oído, motor y comunicación. Determinar una elegibilidad sería criterios de exclusión e inclusión y necesidades educativas también.
All right, this is the last type of meeting we're going to talk about tonight. Thanks for bearing with me. So the purpose of the annual review is to review the progress of the past IEP goals presented during the present levels of performance, which is I guess kiddingly referred to as a plop. At least I've heard it discussed as that. So basically, we're going to discuss where your student is progressing with those goals that were determined at prior meetings. So this is going to take place every 12 months, once a year. It's strengths-based. That's where we're telling you where your student is at and how they're functioning in the classroom. You're going to get input from all the team members again, including yourselves. We're going to ask for input from you guys again as the stakeholders and as the guardians and parents and family members. And based on the input we get, we'll either keep going with a specific goal if they haven't maybe met that goal yet, or we'll determine whether a new goal needs to be proposed. This is also where we'll propose minutes. And that's, we talked about earlier, a decrease or an increase in services and minutes. But all the team members will propose their minutes for the next coming year. And we're going to propose accommodations as well. So your student, as part of their IEP, will get accommodations in the classroom and for district-based assessments, and also for statewide assessments as well. And then also just formative, summative, everything in the classroom. They're going to get accommodations to help them access the education in the tier 1 setting or the grade level setting. Those accommodations are going to be reproposed and determined whether or not they need them or not, or if they need more accommodations or less, etc. And then at the end of that, proposed educational environment placement. So these are things, again, that are assigned in the initial evaluation and agreed upon. They're gone over again and adjusted if needed. So related services and special education minutes, things like OT, occupational therapy, social work, time with a speech path, etc., transportation, if there's a need for special transportation, an extended school year, if your student would benefit from an extended school year as well.
An extended school year is summer school for students with IEPs, and there's specific criteria for the child to qualify for services.
And the aim there would be, among the aims there would be to close the summer gap, to get access, more access.
Yeah, it's actually to maintain their current progress. So why ESY is actually a really important part for some of our students is it's actually to prevent them from having what's called a summer regression, and it's to have them maintain their skills so that they're ready to go for the fall. And this year we tried something new, and it looks like we might even be doing it again, where for extended school year we broke it up into 2 chunks, one in June and then one actually in August, to kind of do like a boot camp to get the skills back up and ready to go for the child right before school starts. Right. Oh, Missy, did you?
El tipo de reunión del IEP sería el propósito de las metas. Revisar el proceso de las metas pasadas del IEP y los niveles actuales del desempeño. Desarrollar y revisar el IEP el propuesto. La frecuencia sería cada 2 meses de esta junta. La agenda se vería como más o menos así, presentar los niveles del desempeño, cómo está el estudiante, hablar de cómo va y cómo están sus, pues el proceso del apoyo que se está realizando hacia él, basando en fortalezas, breve descripción en su rendimiento educativo, SEL y funcional, aporte de los padres, familia, propuestas de los maestros, acomodaciones propuestas, ubicación del entorno educativo propuesto, minuto de servicios relacionados y educación especial, transportación, también se hablaría si el estudiante requeriría como un bus con menos alumnos, y año escolar extendido. Tengo entendido que el año escolar extendido es como lo parten en dos grupos, para que sería estos grupos, uno en junio y también una semana serían en junio y también regresarían como en agosto, para que ellos antes de que se empiece la escuela, pues con calma ellos tomen tiempo de agarrar otra vez el ritmo de qué es ir a la escuela de nuevo.
I think Dr. Olson and myself, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but share the same exact, I guess, notion that if you're going to take anything away from this presentation, that you are a massive part of the IEP team and that you have equal voice throughout the process. It is a hugely important aspect of the meeting, each of the meetings, and as we go along the process, that we get a lot of input from you as parents and as family members, because that's going to help us apply the best resources and services that we can. And you're the experts on your student, as Dr. Olson said previously. So you have equal voice during the entire process, and we're not going to do anything without your permission. So That goes through for the domain meeting, the evaluation meeting, the IEP meetings, and every step of the process in between. Collaboration is key. To develop an accurate and appropriate IEP for your student. You have educational rights as well. These include procedural safeguards. If you don't agree, you can talk with the team anytime you'd like. The IEP team can be called by, an IEP meeting can be called by parents via request throughout the year. So if you are, if you're noticing something at home that is concerning and you say, hey, I'd like to call an update meeting with the team to see if maybe this is happening at school, or I just need some support, the IEP team is there for you. And you can invite anyone you'd like to the meeting. So this includes family members, advocates, if you have a teacher from a former classroom that was really great with your student, they could come on as an advocate, those kind of things as well. So you're entitled to all these things and you have equal voice throughout the process. And it's really important that you all know that.
Additionally, with the procedural safeguards, what that is actually your rights as a parent of a child that is going through an evaluation or has an IEP. And it goes through, and I kind of joke sometimes that it's some light reading because it's like a chunk of information, but we're here to help you with that. And it really is what your rights are. And that if you disagree with what the team is recommending, there's a procedure that you can follow, and what the team is to be doing and what you're expecting from us, because there are very tight timelines that we have to follow legally, and they're actually explained in the procedural safeguards. And I always say to family that if you ever want to sit down and review it together, I'm happy to do it, because it's a very cumbersome document and there's a lot of information about it and in it.
De lo siguiente que vamos a hablar sería la igualdad de voz durante el proceso de todo este IEP. Todos los miembros del equipo educativo tienen la misma voz durante el proceso del IEP. Como la reunión del dominio, reunión de evaluación y reunión del IEP. Los padres no son enormes para el equipo. La colaboración es clave de desarrollar un IEP claro, preciso y apropiado. Los padres tienen derechos educativos, garantías, las cuales serían los siguientes. Garantías procesales. Si no está de acuerdo, hable con el equipo. Ya que si usted no está de acuerdo con algo que un maestro piensa acerca del estudiante, porque por cualquier cosa usted no piensa que eso sería algo que el estudiante necesitaría, pues tiene que dejarlo saber. También ustedes como padres tienen derecho al hablar y a decir, no, es que pues no estoy de acuerdo con que se le realiza esta tipo de apoyo a mi hijo por cualquier razón que usted tenga que decir. Si no entiende alguna otra cosa, pues algún maestro que se encuentra en la escuela le podría dar también el apoyo de sentarse con usted y explicarle lento y con más tiempo acerca de lo que usted no entendió. Las reuniones del IEP pueden ser convocadas por los padres a través de una solicitud durante todo el año. Puede también usted invitar a quien quiera en la reunión, ya sería como familiares, a sus hermanas o otras personas que ustedes confíen que a lo mejor puedan igual opinar acerca del estudiante y su comportamiento o su educación.
All right. So, go ahead.
No, it's so that in that same regard, with your procedural safeguards, just more of your rights prior to the meeting. So prior to the meeting, as far as communication of it, you're going to receive a notification of conference, and that's going to be received 10 school days prior to the IEP meeting. Just telling you, hey, this is coming up, and it's going to happen on this day and this time, what type of meeting it is. So this is your year for your, this is an initial evaluation, or this is your year for your 3-year reeval, just so you know what to expect and what type of meeting is coming. You'll also on that same notice of conference, you'll get the attendees. So who's going to be at your meeting, so that you know who to expect at that meeting as well. And then the paperwork for an evaluation for IEP meeting. So you'll get a draft copy and it will be sent home 3 days prior to the IEP so that you can look it over before you come to the meeting, in case that kind of sparks any additional concerns you might have or additional questions you might have. So you can be more prepared when you come to meet at the school for the IEP meeting.
And we love that parents go through the draft IEP or the draft evaluation, because it allows us to have some really good in-depth conversations. Whereas if you didn't have the IEP prior, you might not know some of that information, and we may spend more time on going over the information and not actually going into in-depth with your questions or concerns. And the team really wants to make sure that, again, you're understanding it, because it's a lot of jargon. And we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and it is a long process, and there's a lot of complicated different terms to it and legalities to it.
Ahorita vamos a hablar qué es lo que pasa antes de las reuniones. Los padres recibirán lo siguiente: recibirán una notificación de conferencia, se recibirá antes de la reunión, de la hora de la reunión, tipo de reunión, miembros del equipo escolar que asistirán a la junta, un papeleo para las reuniones de evaluación del IEP, y se enviarán borradores a casa 3 días del IEP.
All right, so now jumping into the components of the IEP. So, we've gone over what the type of meetings are, and then what the procedures are prior to meeting. Now I want to kind of go in, we're going to go kind of more in depth of what is in an IEP and what are the key components that really make up the IEP. First being the present levels of performance, then our goals, then the accommodations, and then the educational placement.
En el siguiente tema vamos a hablar de los componentes del IEP, los niveles actuales del desempeño, metas, acomodaciones, colocación educativa.
So first is the present levels of performance. Mr. Freiberger did talk briefly about it, and what they are in-depth, really just a presentation of how your child is performing in the classroom, what their goals are and how they're performing with their progress towards the goals, and then any formalized data that the team has, may that be like a STAR assessment or a progress monitoring assessment, maybe in classroom formalized assessments, Fontes and Pinnell reading logs and reading assessments. All of those different pieces are used to really tell us about how they're performing in the academic achievement position and where they are progressing. So how are they doing in terms of their peers when we compare them? And then are they making growth? And what does that growth look like? The other piece in the present levels of performance is talking about the student strengths. As Matt said, is we are strength focused, but we also want to talk about what are their strengths. Wow, they're really great at being organized, or man, are they a great helper in class? Because as we know with an IEP, there is some focus on what the student's not able to do, but we want to talk about what they can do and why that actually benefits them and helps them. And we want to celebrate that because their strengths are going to help them throughout their entire life. And it needs to be noted what their strengths are. So going on with that, present levels of academic performance, we've talked about the formalized data, the updates from the classroom teacher, the IEP progress, and then the special education teachers update. But then we go on to something called functional performance. And that is, how are they navigating the building? How are they in classroom? Are they organized? Do they need a lot of reminders to stay on task? Are they needing some more supports with their executive functioning? What is going on inside that classroom that is not academic related, but more about their independence level and their functional level inside that classroom? If they're younger, can they hang up their jacket independently, put away their backpack, put away their missing, or put away their assignments, notice that they're missing assignments, have an organizational system. All those pieces are part of their functional performance. And that is another key part that we look at to say, okay, do they need some supports on that? Do they need a goal? Do they need some accommodations? If there are some areas that need some growth. After we go through that functional performance, we then have an area for parent concerns or even parent feedback. And that's your chance there as a parent that we're documenting all of your questions, all your concerns, what you're seeing at home, what you're feeling like might really help the child, or what you felt like at home that really helps. So that's just your place that we're documenting all those different things. But we also during the meeting are taking notes and documenting what you're saying and what the team's saying, so that there is a log of how the meeting went, and so that you can go back after the meeting and look at it, because we also know that there's a lot of information being thrown at you, and we want you to be able to process through that and have all the details of that meeting. In the last part that's in that present levels is that adverse effect of the disability. So during that eligibility meeting, we will talk about how is your child impacted and affected by their disability. Why do they need certain supports, and what does that look like? And that's where in this area we will list how their disability is really impacting them.
Vamos a hablar de los niveles actuales del desempeño. Fortalezas del estudiante, desempeño académico, proceso de la meta del IEP. Vamos a hablar de todas las metas que los maestros quieren que el estudiante pues cumpla y llegue a su meta. Actualizaciones del área académica, datos formales, presentación funcional, como serían las habilidades de funcionamiento ejecutivo, independencia en habilidades de autoayuda. En este caso, si hay cosas que ustedes ven que ellos necesitan como un poquito más de ayuda en que a lo mejor no pueden acomodar sus papeles en un folder, o que necesitan ayuda a amarrarse las agujetas, o que no pueden hacer una cierta actividad o una cosa, pues eso también se comunicaría hacia los maestros para que ellos pues hagan nota de todas las cosas que el estudiante no puede realizar, y ya ellos pues tengan un apoyo y se puedan enfocar en esas cosas que el estudiante no puede hacer, para que pues al final de su progreso pues esperemos y él ya lo pueda cumplir. Algunas otras preocupaciones de los padres, cualquier preocupación que usted tenga, igual pues debería de compartirlo con todos los maestros. Si usted nota que hace cosas en la escuela o en la casa que no hace en la escuela, o viceversamente, pues también tendría que comunicarlo con los maestros. Un efecto adverso de la discapacidad también.
All right, goals. So our goals are written based on our educational needs that are determined in the eligibility. So we know what the child needs to work on and what their strengths are, as well as their areas of growth. And that's where we write the goals. And the IEP goals are to be SMART goals, meaning that they are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And as a team, we collect data at least once or twice a week on the goals, so that we can track the progress of your child and say how they're doing, as well as document if our interventions are helping them, or if we need to look at it and look at different accommodations to support them.
Vamos a hablar un poquito de las metas. Las metas del IEP se desarrollan en base de las necesidades educativas de la evaluación más reciente. Los objetivos deberían ser objetivos de los niños que son listos. Y se describiría así como específico, medible, alcanzable, realista y oportuno. Los datos se recopilan semanalmente sobre los objetivos, ya que cada semana pues a los maestros les gustaría saber pues qué meta ya han alcanzado y cumplido los estudiantes para poder pues celebrar esas metas.
So next is accommodations. Accommodations are for a support that we put into place for our students with IEPs, and it's really to make an adjustment to the environment, the instructions, or the materials that allows the student to complete or really attend to the tasks throughout their day. The accommodations are really supposed to be specifically related to their educational needs and be there as a way for them to level the playing field and be able to access the curriculum and the instruction. So some really good examples that you may see if your child has an IEP is extended time. And we like to be specific so that teams know what we're looking for. So example would be up to time and a half or double time. Then assignments grouped or chunked into similar like content. Then we have preferential seating where we might have a student who has a vision disability and they need to be up close and right by the teacher so that they can see what's on the board or what the teacher may be presenting. Outlines for taking notes so that the student can follow along and not be focused on writing the outline out, but actually just putting in the key details. Small group setting for assessments so that it's less distracting, and then visual schedules so that the student can see what is going on and have a visual representation of each item that they're to be followed through the day.
Vamos a hablar de las acomodaciones. Las acomodaciones son ajustes al entorno, la instrucción o los materiales que permiten que un estudiante con una discapacidad acceda al contenido o complete las tareas asignadas. Las acomodaciones deben ser específicas y directamente relacionadas con las necesidades educativas de los estudiantes, como por ejemplo, tiempo extendido hasta tiempo y medio, tareas agrupadas con contenido similar, asiento preferencial, asiento cerca de un maestro, esquemas provistos para tomar notas o configuración de juntos pequeños para evaluaciones. También se le daría como horarios visuales.
So next is our educational placement. And when I said in the beginning, we talked about what a least restrictive environment would be, that's the time is now. A least restrictive environment is where the child can be in a setting where they can access their curriculum and their instruction at their level. So least restrictive environment is going to look very different for every child, but it is their right to be in that least restrictive environment. And what an educational placement really is where they're receiving their services. Is it in a special education setting, or maybe it's in a general education setting? It's just based off of what your student is needing and where they're functioning at, and then what level of support is actually needed for them to make progress towards their IEP goals. There is a continuum of special education services that we'll go through next, and that will really talk about the different settings, because there are different settings that a student can have their needs met in.
Colocación educativa. La colocación educativa es donde sus estudiantes reciben su instrucción básica y especializada en servicios relacionados. Cada estudiante debe ser menos restrictivos, entorno menos restrictivo. Estudiantes en salón de clases que satisfaga sus necesidades educativas y sea menos restrictivo. Hay un continuo de servicios de educación especial también.
So here's the continuum of services. And so starting would be unfortunately, I got some really bad feedback. Mitzi, do you mind muting? That might help.
I'm sorry?
Do you mind muting? I'm going to mute you. Okay, there we go. So when we look at a continuum of services, it goes from least amount of support to most amount of support. And where we'd start is our itinerant services, where your child would come only into the school setting to receive some specialized services like speech or OT, maybe some hearing or vision services. Then we have something that's called pull out or resource, which is when a special education teacher would come in and grab your child to go ahead and go out of the classroom and receive some specialized services and instruction. And then the other one would be a push-in, where actually the special education teacher is pushing inside of the general education classroom and not pulling the student out. And that doesn't just have to be a special education teacher, it actually can be a related service staff member as well. And that is to support that student inside that general education environment. Then we have what's called like a self-contained classroom, where it is a all special education classroom, and it is taught by a special education teacher, and the students are going out for different things, but it is much more minimal than if a student is receiving pull-out services in the general education environment. Our next restrictive measure would be a therapeutic setting. That is when we are seeing that a student is really requiring a more therapeutic approach with highly structured, highly specialized instruction and services to really meet their educational needs. And that, again, is determined as an IEP team. And it can be something that is needed just to go ahead and address those needs. And it can be for a variety of reasons. To note here that those therapeutic placements are not inside the district and can be upwards of 30 to 40 minutes away. We try not to do that, but because there are specialized services, we want to make sure that it's the best match for the child and have their needs met. Then the most restrictive is something called residential, and that is where they actually live and are receive all their services and live in the environment to really have their education and their therapeutic needs met. And that is a very restrictive measure that is not taken lightly, and that is something that again the team would be talking with the families about, and it would really be a team decision, and its need for that is few and far between, but it can be warranted based on the needs of a student.
Comunidad de servicios. El tipo de servicios serían servicios inherentes en un entorno de educación especial. ¿Qué están recibiendo? El estudiante viene de la escuela solo para servicios unilaterales, que sería el SLP, audición y visión OT. El apoyo afuera de la clase. ¿Dónde estaría el estudiante? En un entorno de educación especial. ¿Qué estará recibiendo? Propósito, instrucción especializada basada en las necesidades educativas. El tipo de servicio de apoyo adentro de la clase sería ¿dónde estaría el estudiante? El salón de educación general. ¿Y qué tipo de servicio estarían recibiendo? Instrucción especializada dentro del salón de clases de educación general. Tipo de servicio sería del salón de educación especial individualizado. ¿Dónde estaría el estudiante? Sería que estuviera en el salón de educación especial durante el mayor parte de su escolar. ¿Qué tipo de servicio estaría recibiendo? Sería la instrucción especializada de todas las áreas académicas basadas por un maestro de educación especial. Entorno estructurado, hasta 13 estudiantes en la clase. Tipo de servicio, otro tipo de servicio sería entorno terapéutico. ¿Y en qué salón estaría el estudiante? Este sería fuera de la clase del distrito, de la escuela del distrito, en la escuela de educación especial también. ¿Qué tipo de servicio estaría recibiendo el estudiante? Y sería altamente estructurado, con procedimientos interesados de gestión del comportamiento, enfoques terapéuticos por parte de proveedores de educación especial y servicios relacionados altamente capacitados. Otro servicio sería el residencial, y donde estaría colocado el estudiante sería el estudiante vive en las instalaciones a tiempo completo fuera de la escuela del distrito también. ¿Qué tipo de apoyo estaría recibiendo el estudiante? Es clínicamente enfocado para proporcionar terapia e instrucción individualizadas para el estudiante, entorno pequeño y alternamente estructurado.
So some of our key takeaways that we really would like to focus on tonight is that parents are the most important team members, and they're very important to us as an educational team. Collaboration of school and home is key for us to make a plan that is going to meet your child's needs. Please stop us and ask questions at any time. Do not be afraid of asking questions. We love questions. We want to make sure that you're understanding everything. And then please know that we are here to help and support you in any way we can.
Conclusiones claves. Los padres son miembros importantes del equipo. La colaboración de la escuela y el hogar es clave. Haga preguntas en cualquier momento. La escuela está aquí para apoyarlos. Si tienen alguna pregunta o alguna cosa que a ustedes les preocupan, no se detengan. La escuela, todos los maestros, vamos a estar ahí siempre para escucharlos y apoyarlos en lo que ustedes necesiten.
So this is our time now. If you have any questions that you may ask them at any point right here, or if you'd like, you can always email me or Mr. Freiberger, and we're happy to help. And then if you don't mind completing that short survey just to give us some feedback on our presentations, we would love it. So we'll wait a minute here and see if you have any questions.
Si tienen alguna pregunta, pues pueden poner en la cajita de abajo. Ya si tienen algunas otras preguntas igual de otra manera, pueden mandarle un email a Mr. Freiberger o Dr. Alson, o incluso llamar a la escuela. Nosotros podríamos ayudarles.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you guys so much for attending tonight. And again, if you need anything, to please reach out to us and we're happy to help you. And again, have a great night and thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Ms. Monroy.
No, thank you. Good night.